Hey, welcome to video number 6 in this series where I'm going to show you how to create a slightly more complex material that is made out of multiple layers, and we're going to concentrate on the plastic, and I'm also going to show you how to do custom paint to reveal certain materials in your projects. Let's go ahead and jump straight into it. All right, so this is roughly where we left in the previous video. Again, this is just a sample, the rust and the metal. This is purely to show you how everything works, but I'm happy with like a cleaner look, right? But I'm going to leave it on just for the sake of continuity from the previous video. So in this video, we're going to concentrate on creating something slightly more complex for something like the plastic, right? It could be absolutely anything. But I guess the point that I'm going to try to show you in this video is that the complexity is achieved through a stack of layers and very simple things. So ultimately, the more simple layers and basic effects that you add, that is going to build the complexity, right? So you don't need to find a material that has the complexity already inbuilt in there, even though, you can. So if you type, let's say something like plastic, these are the ones that come with Painter anyway. So I'm sure that if you type plastic, this is what you'll see, right? So you have maybe this plastic elevation and just drag and drop it into your model, and then you already have something complex. But it might be harder to find the specific thing that you want for your project. So this is what this video is all about, is creating your own custom material so you can tweak it and you know how it is built, right? There are fantastic resources online that you can purchase, that you can download. However, I don't think anything can beat the fact of you building your own assets and learning the process, because then you know how to control that asset and you can repurpose it as well. So that is the aim, right? So let's go ahead and start with step number 1, which is creating our folder. And I'm going to call this one plastic. And in the plastic, I'm going to create a base layer, and I'm going to call this one plastic base. All right. So the plastic base is the one that we need to enable a bunch of stuff. I'm going to enable all of the necessary channels because at the top is going to replace anything that has metal or anything like that. So right now we have a non-metallic material that is pretty rough, but I think it works as a plastic. It has a little bit of shine to it. And I'm going to choose a plastic that has a bit of tint. So let's make a green plastic or something yellowish, something like this, right? So it's going to be, this is going to be a plastic color. That's it. And then the next step is going to be focusing on the variation of the surface. Now you can sort of like see through some of the information of the dents and the scratches, because I have the layers underneath enabled. So one thing you can do, if you don't want to have that, if you want to override things completely, and this is kind of like a side note in a way, or an extra tip, you can go to the channels here, this drop down, select the hide information, and we're going to change the linear dodge, which is the default blending mode for hide, so that whenever you create something, it blends with the previous one. But if you want to, you can change that to be replace. So if you click replace, it should replace anything underneath. Now, if you do that, if you click on replace and you don't see any changes, that is because in this case, we have this layer inside the folder. So if I take this out of the folder, like so, you see it replaces all of those details. And as soon as I put that into the plastic, those details are back. That is because of the properties of the folder are also set by default in a way that allows you to work faster and more efficiently. But in some cases, you will actually want to replace things. So I'm going to select the folder, and instead of clicking on replace, which would work the same way, all I want to do is click on pass through. So pass through in a folder is going to basically allow, or it's going to tell Painter to allow anything that is set in the layers to pass through. So because I set this layer to be replacing the hide information, the folder is telling, or we're telling the software, look, in the plastic folder, anything like hide information that is set to replace, let it pass through, right? So that is why it's working, right? So as a summary, all I've done is I selected the hide information from here. I changed the hide in the plastic base to be replaced, and that's replacing everything. And in order to see it when it's within the folder, I set the folder to pass through. That's it. All right, let's go back to base color, which is the default anyway. So this is our base plastic ready to go. Let's go ahead and start playing around with some variation to this color. So I'm going to take this one, Control D to duplicate. This time I'm going to concentrate only on the color. So I'm going to press the Alt key and select color. And I'm going to change it to something very, very subtle. I want to make it slightly darker and more desaturated. That's it. That's how important it is to build complexity with very simple layers. So only one change, very, very subtle. I'm gonna bring in a mask. In fact, let me actually show you something else, right? I'm gonna go ahead and find grunge in my textures. So type grunge, and I'm gonna find something that has enough values, but it's not too contrasted. Maybe this one, grunge concrete all. Now, if I click and drag this into the viewport, it's just going to project, or it's gonna allow me to project this as a texture. I don't want that. I actually want this to be the mask of my new layer. So I can drag and drop it into this section right here, and this automatically is gonna create the black mask, and it's gonna create a fill layer and assign this grunge into the layer. All right, so hopefully you can see immediately what is happening, right? I'm gonna show you the mask itself. We can maybe tile this a little bit, and I'm gonna select that, and I'm gonna add a little bit of balance and contrast. So very, very subtle, and I think I'm gonna make things even more subtle. So I'm gonna go back to the layer, I'm gonna select that color, and I'm gonna go up a little bit, just a tiny bit, right? So again, if I go just into the color, so I'm gonna select this drop down, go to base color, it's kind of like hard to see, but there is a bit of variation, just a tiny bit between the darker color and a green color. And this is the essence of building a complex texture. Just subtle variations like this will make it very complex. Now let's go ahead and go back to the material. And now that I have this very simple setup, I'm gonna call this one color var 1, as in variation 1. Control D to duplicate that color, and I'm gonna go to the mask, and I'm gonna switch these to something else, something random. It doesn't have to be the same one. And then I'm gonna change the color. So let's do something darker, maybe a little bit yellowish. So it's kind of like a decoloration of that green. There we go, something like this. Now, this might look a little bit too extreme compared to what I just did before, right? But if you look at this area, right? So, it's starting to look a bit more complex, but you have another level of control, which is the opacity. So I'm gonna click on this one and reduce the opacity a tiny bit. There we go. All right, so we have two layers now on top of the base layer, and that is already creating a nice complex variation. Now for the next one, I'm gonna use a generator. So this time I'm gonna create a new layer from scratch. I'm gonna bring in a black mask, and I'm gonna bring in a generator. And for this one, I'm gonna target let's actually use something that comes with painters. So maybe let's try this metal edgeware, right? I know that this is not metal, but we can totally change this. So I'm gonna click on this one, and you see that targets those edges nicely. And what we can do is play around with the grunge amount. So I'm gonna reduce the grunge amount so that it changes that sort of like grungy scratch that has all over this place, all over the edges, and it's just going to reduce that quite a bit. Also the scale, maybe we can increase that to reduce, to have something a little bit smaller. In that case, we can reduce the contrast and play with the wear level, right? And I wanna reduce the contrast because this, by default, this is the metal edge wear generator. So usually, the difference will be pretty clear when it comes to metal and another material. But because this is purely an effect to adjust the plastic towards the edges and make it kind of like decolorating that towards the edges, I think this works just fine. So now I'm gonna go ahead and select this eyedropper, and I'm gonna select the same green color. And when you use the eyedropper, it kind of like selects the shade, right? So if I select this area, you'll see it is a dark green. So I'm just selecting the green based on the lighting that I have. You can also press the shift key and select the base color, but I'm just gonna select this color right here, which makes things lighter. And I'm just gonna make it a bit darker. All right, so that is my edge done. Now, if you wanna brighten things up even further, you can blend this as a screen, for instance, and that is going to brighten things up quite a bit, and then you can play around with the opacity. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, this should be very, very familiar. All right, so now we have a plastic that looks, much better and rather complex compared to what we had before, which was just a single layer. If I turn this off, this is kind of like, all right, but it's boring. And we create a lot of complexity just with 4 or 3 layers, really. We can go more than that. We can create 5, 10, as many layers as you want just to variate this. Now, once we set this up, what I'll do is I'm gonna go back to layer 1 or color variation 1. And in this one, I'm gonna enable roughness. So remember, this is the mask for layer 1. But now that we have roughness, we can just go ahead and start playing with a bit of variation. So I can make it a bit shinier, or I can just make it a bit, sharper or rougher. I'll do the same thing with this one, enable roughness, and I'm gonna make this a little bit. Actually, let's push this one to be duller because it's kind of like the more rusty, even though it's not rust in plastic, but the rougher section of the plastic. So I can make it a bit rougher. Again, it's all about the subtleties of the material. And on this one, let's do the same thing, rough, and I'm just gonna make it a bit shinier, right? So now if I go into the rough channel, which is what we've been tweaking, roughness, you see we have a lot of variation, right? So the white areas are the rougher sections, and the darker areas are the ones that have more shine to it. So anything that is towards the edges is a little bit more polished, tends to catch more of the light. So you see that nice shine in there. But because this is the mask of the curvature, but I can push this and make it duller if we wanted to. I think it makes more sense to have kind of like more sharp, you know, reflections in there. But that is how you can create a rather complex, in this case plastic, but that looks really interesting. Now to complete this effect and just add to the, let's say, the advanced material generation, I'm going to add another layer that only has the height information enabled. And for that, we're going to go ahead and find something like noise. And we're going to find a noise. Let's try this clouds one, drop it in there into the height. And you see, it just makes things really, really extreme. I'm going to increase the tiling of this. So it is very, very intense. We can play around with the balance to have less or more, and play with the contrast, all of that good stuff. However, this is still very, very high in contrast and very strong. Something like this looks awful, right? If you see something textured like this, it's not going to be any good. So the way that we can adjust this, since this is controlled by a texture already, you see I don't have any mask in here, is by dropping a levels. Let's click on levels that targets that height information, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on base color, and I'm going to select the height. So now we have these levels that allows us to control the height information. So I'm going to push this back, so we have a bit more range. And I'm going to take this white flag here and I'm going to push it back. So that is going to reduce how much of that height information we can see through. So very, very tiny, just something like this. So you see, very subtle. And this is not even using a mask. This is actually an effect that we added directly into the layer, right? So if you remember, all I've done is, instead of dragging these clouds into a mask fill, I drag that straight into the height information of this layer. So that is the layer information done. But then we can add a mask. So I'm going to bring in a mask in here. And for instance, we can use some generators. I don't know. Let's try the fiberglass. See what that gives us. So this is a little bit too intense. That might not work. Let's try something else. Let's try dirt. So that's a little bit better. So better in terms of like what's the spreadiness of it. I'm going to invert it. There we go. So we have like these grungy bits on top. But of course, we can take the opacity of this dirt and we can reduce it. So we can just do something like this to 5. So again, make things very, very subtle. And all I want to do is vary the amount of details, the placement of all details. So it's not perfect. It's not absolutely everywhere, right? And I think this is a little bit too strong. So if it was me just to set this up, I'll do it even less, so like 2, maybe 1 more. So let's go for 3. So let's go for a value of 3. There we go. So we have, if I rotate the light, so we have a subtle set of plastic. So I think this works really, really well. It's very, very simple. And all we have to do now is, collapse this. Let's give it a green color just to match, a lighter green color to match the color in here. And then we can add this to any folder that we want. So maybe I want this top bit to be the plastic. So I'm going to drag it into the paint. And now this is my paint color. Now, this is it in terms of the more complex color. So I just wanted to show you this because it is very easy. It's a very simple setup. You just have multiple layers and each layer contributes to something of the material. Because this technique is the best one if you want to have like a reference of, let's bring just the final render as an example. But if you want to, let's say, look at this image and replicate this, right? You can start building the complexity based on what you see in the reference. So you start with maybe a gray layer, then you have another one that varies add like these little, spots, for example, with height and a little bit of color. Then you add another one that adds this variation between the lighter gray and the darker gray. So it is a lot easier to understand and break down a material if you have it in multiple layers. Now, one last thing that I want to show you in this tutorial is that even if you don't like this, you don't have to go back layer by layer and change the colors. You can drag and drop an HSL perceptive. So let's go ahead and click on this icon to filter by the effects and type HSL perceptive. This one right here, and I'm going to drag and drop that into the the folder here at the top. So this creates a paint layer that is set to pass through, and it adds the HSL perceptive, which is a hue saturation lightness. So you can change the entirety of your plastic. So, if I don't like the green one, I want to have my kind of like black plastic. I want to desaturate it, and I want to bring the lightness down and maybe add a bit of hue to it. That's it. So now we have a black plastic just by changing this. And if you're not happy with this, you can just toggle that off or change this to be more saturated, lighter, maybe like a purplish tone. So it's a lot of fun. You set up this in a non-destructive way, so you can open up this file in a week's time and say, you know what, this looks a little bit ridiculous. I don't want that. Let's go ahead and set it to a darker color, and we go with something like this, right? But you still have, and you still retain the values of the height information that we set up, the roughness, and all that good stuff. All right, so that's it for another tip in this series. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can take what we already have here and turn it into a much more stylized render where you can see kind of like the brush strokes and that sort of thing that looks very interesting. It's like a completely different style, but I just want to cover it as well. All right, I'll see you in the next video.